I read that statement of resignation has not changed. The person you accused of being weak and malleable and unable to execute his duties is still chebukati. Then the best you would do, therefore, is to say, what then is the right way to resign? And that is why, to an extent, I think Paul Kurgat, who was with them and has not shown up at his office, needs to be applauded for standing in what he believed. He believed there were major issues bedeviling IEBC at the time, at least in his opinion, and he thought that he did not want to be part of it anymore. Mm-hmm. So for the two good ladies who have decided to return to their office, thankfully we have not been told whether they've said they've come back to work or they came back to pick things from their offices. We therefore can only imagine that they came back to report to duty. If that is the case, it's the most unfortunate thing. They need to be, I think they need to be prosecuted, because you do not play around with one of the things that Kenyans hold as a dear gem, which is the electoral process, and then you decide that you did not think right. It means there must be politics or something behind the banner. Mm-hmm. It has been bandied around, I don't know how true, that their intention was to ensure that Chebukati leaves office so that they create a crisis. And when Chebukati did not leave office, they found themselves with egg on face. And so they're trying to see if they can remedy that. Because tragically, it would be almost impossible to subsequently find another job elsewhere, because you would have to explain the conditions under which you left IEBC. Mm-hmm. So it is an issue of conscience. And it is an issue of Kenyans sometimes only knowing that mediocre is never punished, that mediocrity is not punished.
But Mr. Siani, these two commissioners who returned to office say that that decision to return is pegged on the court's ruling, because the court made its ruling on the 10th of August. So what has necessitated their change of mind? Because they had said that IEBC chair, that is wafula Chebukati, sort of like they faulted him for not managing the commission rightly. So what do you think necessitated their change of mind?
I tell you what, the courts ruled that they did not resign in the right manner. The court did not rule that they have been sent back to office. It did not give a ruling sending them to report back to work. The court only said that the manner in which you resigned is not the laid down manner of resignation. What I decipher from that ruling hence is, go back and resign appropriately. Do your resignation appropriately. As a matter of fact, if they have still been drawing from the coffers of IEBC, then they need to be surcharged immediately.
So are we likely to see them resign through the proper channel?
No, we don't. Whether or not they like it, they must be compelled to resign as they had stated they had done, because the basis on which they said they had left office has not changed. And so when the courts rule that they did not resign as stipulated in law, they must then be compelled by country and by the rules that exist in the country and the arms of government that are supposed to be doing that. They must be compelled to resign as is prescribed in law.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what if they decide not to resign? They've gone back to office, but they decide not to resign. What is the way forward for the chair? Because the chair said, according to him, so far as he knows, these three commissioners resigned because they saw an affidavit of resignation. So what will happen?
I think then someone will have to go to court to compel them to resign, or to ask that a committee is set, a task force, well, not even a task force, a committee of inquiry is set, because it's an independent commission. An independent commission is not just fired like that. But if someone went to court, there would be a basis for the courts then to rule that they are in the office illegally. It goes against the Chapter 6 of the Constitution of ethics and integrity, that you must say what you believe and believe in what you say. You can't keep jumping in and out of ship as and when you deem that you know that it's likable. And so one would then need to go to court, and the courts would rely on their statement which exhibits that there was intention to resign. And that intention solely would make a basis for the courts to rule that they are in office illegally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about their going back to office.
Yeah.
And there was not a warm welcome, because when they got back, they found locks changed.
Yeah.
Was it the right thing for the commission to do?
You see, when you act in an archaic manner, when you jump out of the rules of the book, you may only compel the persons there to also utilize the same subsets of rules to counter you, which is what I think Chebukati finds himself, the situation Chebukati finds himself in. He only has the power to deny them access as chair. He can instruct, let's change the locks and they will be changed, or let's change the biometric access and it will be changed, or their biometrics erased. That is the only leverage he has over them. He is not a court of law. He is also obliged to obey the court of law, but to the extent that they are back to resign in the prescribed manner in law. And so that leaves, there's a very limited option for the commission at the moment. The commission seems, in my opinion, still to be having the same politics we saw and factions that we saw. Tragically then, it may then lead to a whole disbandment of the commission. But I believe that the same courts having ruled that the commission was still properly constituted, with Chebukati and the two other commissioners being in place, there could be options of just filling in the spaces left by the three commissioners at this point in time. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And before we cross over to the next topic of corruption in the country,
yes.
What is your take of activist Okiya Mutata heading to court again to challenge the return of the commissioners?
You see, when we passed a constitution, it gave us unique rights that we did not have before the 2010 constitution. And anyone, anywhere in the country can go to any court as many times as they deem fit, or as they think, they are going to court warrants it, to try and seek redress and clarification of the court. The courts or the judiciary is the custodian of our laws. They are the ones who set the bar and the standards of engaging as pertains the rule of law.
Okay.
Now, Okiya Mutata, like many other Kenyans, has seen that this is a joke or a charade and has said, tell you what, I'm going back to the same court to make it clear what they meant when they said that you did not resign in the, you did not resign as is duly prescribed in law.
Okay.
And so I hope it yields something, and the country is able to understand what really did the court mean, because what we are suffering from right now is ambiguity.
Okay.
And when it remains as amorphous and ambiguous as it is, it becomes very hard to pin the commissioners, to hold them to account, to force them to resign. The same court will be able to then clarify what it meant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, away from that IEBC discussion, matters corruption. We've seen the Director of Public Prosecution, that is Nordin Haji, and of course the DCI, taking charge in terms of handling corruption in the country. What is your take on how these two offices have handled corruption?
I tell you what, Bernard, for far too long, you and I reckon there has been hue and cry about how nothing seems to be going on. We are not seeing people being prosecuted. We are not seeing high-level arrests. We are not seeing any action or activity when it comes to fighting graft.
Can you actually, Mr. Osiani, substantiate for us what you mean by we're not seeing?
No. I'm only saying that has been the cry until the president appointed the DCI and the DPP to spearhead the fight against graft. What has been achieved by this fight so far may not entirely be accounted for, because the rulings, the court processes have not been terminated. They have not run the full hog. But I want us to appreciate that at least something has happened. It may not be that the assets that these people have been able to get, courtesy of their corruption, have been clamped down. But you need to know we have been saved a few public officers who would have run down the country a lot more. You have seen people resign and leave high office. Whether or not the courts will indict them is something for the courts to do. But the DPP and the DCI have done their bidding. They have even made the EACC that was slumbering to wake up. And in the wake of what they have been doing, the EACC has made high-end arrests. We saw Governor Evans Kidero, Governor Ojamong being arrested by the EACC on the advice of the DPP, which has then gone to show that the previous holders of some of these offices were either accomplices in the graft trouble, or that they were just underwhelming. And so they have done their bit. They have shown that we can actually compel you to leave office, that we can expose you. Have they done it all? Certainly not. Have they done most of it? Definitely not. Have they done something? Obviously, yes. We need to appreciate the steps made. There are going to be baby steps towards dealing with graft decisively. The people who are entrenched in graft are smart people. They go about looting from this country, but to be able to draw the line and get it to them sometimes is problematic. So there will be challenges at some point. They will hit dead ends in some places. But that they have made the first step is laudable.
Okay, so is the DPP and the DCI getting enough support, like political support, to ensure that the fight against graft becomes successful in the country?
Sadly, for the Kenyan context, the path to political leadership is through the garden of graft. So to get political support will be a challenge. But again, it depends at what levels. The executive, led by the president, has shown, together with his ally, newfound ally, the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, have shown that they will support the fight against graft. The legislature, which is part of the political support we are saying, has not really shown support. Going by the reports, the Kanini Kega report on sugar that we saw, the reports on the land committee, there seems to be a problem with it. So it will go to as far as both political actors, the executive and the legislature, together with the citizenry, are able to support these processes. The citizenry play a very major role in fight against graft and in overall in matters governance. When they put pressure on the state is compelled to do what it is supposed to do.
Okay.
A laxed citizenry does not achieve that. So we still need the citizenry being vigilant, being active, being able to say, we saw this MCA elected the other day, we know what he earns, we know he has not had any major business, or we saw this CEC or county minister being appointed the other day, we know he had none of this. Okay. How come suddenly he has built a palace here? Okay. You see, DPP will not know some of these things across the country. Until Kenyans do their bidding. So yes, the presidency and the executive has shown the willingness to go the whole hog, to lose friends for this fight against graft. Is he going to get the requisite support by Parliament? That's the bigger problem.
Okay, and before you cross over to the cost of living, the opposition.
Yes.
There is concern that the opposition is not so much at the forefront in terms of talking about matters corruption. Yeah. And if I may quote InfoTrack report that was released over the weekend, it actually showed that 43% of Kenyans say that they're not so confident that the handshake between these two leaders, that is President Kenyatta and Honorable Odinga, will actually help in the fight against corruption. So there is a section of Kenyans who believe that the opposition is not so much at the forefront in talking about matters corruption.
I know when we talk about opposition, we talk about the minority in Parliament, because the Constitution has not very overtly, envisaged an opposition in the country. So we do not have the opposition in the country, as it were. However, the minority in parliament, by default of not having made the government substantively, is supposed to be the opposition. And the belief here then is that the NASA or NASA-allied parliamentarians should be spearheading the fight as the opposition or checkmating the government. But here is the dicey thing. The leader of the perceived opposition, the official leader who ran against the incumbent president, has had a pact with the president saying these are the issues that as the opposition we would have. It is about corruption. The 9-point building the bridges agenda. It's about inclusivity. It's about equity, equality. It's so much that they would be fighting for. They said if we were to be on the floor of the House, we would pursue these 9 points. And then they had an agreement with the sitting presidents to sort out that under the framework called the Building Bridges Initiative, whose successes we are unable to tell because they asked us to give them a year so that we are able to then assess them based on what they requested. So now, if this is the framework they've decided to work in, which is the Building the Bridges Initiative, it becomes very problematic and challenging, rather, to then get on the floor of the House to become vocal in opposing the policies as pushed by the sitting government.
Okay.
Because they then seemed to be co-joined at the hip with the sitting government to the extent that their biggest problems must be resolved within a framework. And then it then means that even the increased fight against graft, against corruption, may be attributed to that building the bridges. However, suffice to say, all parliamentarians, whether government allied or NASA or opposition aligned, have a duty to country and to the people who elected them to do what is right. When all is said and done, it doesn't matter what side of the divide you are on. It doesn't matter the agreement that the leaders have made. We must do what is right. When we talk about corruption in parliament, it bedevils both NASA and Jubilee alike.
Okay. Yeah. Let's cross over to the cost of living.
Yes.
16% increment on VAT by 1st of September.
Yeah.
And this will affect basic commodities. Is there another way the government would have handled this issue of 16% in terms of collecting tax?
Worldwide, taxation is one of the most challenging things. Kenya is not yet a middle-income economy per se. We are almost into the middle-income economy. It means a vast population, a majority of Kenyans still rely on kerosene. I know that electricity and connectivity has increased enormously in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years. But access to it has still been a challenge because it's not free. And in some instances, we've had issues of corruption with Kenya Power leading to inflated bills, which the common man cannot be able to afford. It means a lot of people will then rely on kerosene. For a country which has quite a populace still living below $1 a day, if you tax that commodity, then you infringe on the poor or people in the lower cadre. But even the middle class will feel its pinch. A country that grows has to have a sizable and a growing middle income, middle level or middle class, because these are the ones who will then create even a vast majority of jobs and employment opportunities, which is why I think the pursuit of the Big Four agenda is important, because then it broadens the middle class, automatically, therefore, it will broaden the lower class. So the Treasury has to relook at why it has to tax and who can afford this taxation. Have we been able, like many other European and Western countries have done, to tax the upper class to 35%? If a billionaire is taxed, the effect of taxing the billionaires in this country who own about 25 or 30% of the country, if they are taxed correctly, then the lower class will only be trying to meet the gap. 16% increase on VAT for petrol may seem little. It may look like it's just a 2% increase. But on the whole, it is going to be problematic. Problematic because there are people who also take advantage of these increases in pricing and then hit so hard at the populace and the citizens. And we do not have an official regulatory body that will stop matatus, for example, from charging a lot of money. We do not have people who will go and check that all petrol stations in this country will sell kerosene at the agreed price. Some will mark it up by 3 shillings, some will mark it up by another 2 shillings. Until you resolve this, an extra taxation of the citizenry, of the lower cadre, becomes an issue that will be a tough thing to navigate.
Okay, so according to you, the way forward probably for the government is to actually increase the tax bracket.
Yes.
So that we can do away with the 16%.
Exactly. If you increase the tax brackets, it may not entirely, even increasing the tax brackets may not entirely resolve this. There's so much to put into account before taxation. What is the percentage living below the poverty line in the country? What are their sources of income? What are the employment rates? What is the major source of energy in this country? How then is this taxation going to impact on the livelihoods of the people? What are our, living standards? There's such a huge and vast, there are many things to put into context before you go on to tax the country. But you will also understand the tough place the government finds itself in. We are embroiled in debt. For the first time, we've gotten to these levels of debt. Someone has to pay the debt. It falls on us. Some were inherited. Some have been incurred in the last 5 years. They have to be paid. But is taxation, leaving this taxation on fuel, the right thing to do? As it were, we have been paying quite a lot compared to the market, the global market prices for our fuel. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Those are the sentiments of David Osiani, who is a public policy consultant. And we are talking about the state of the nation this morning on KTN News Center. We shall continue having this discussion after the short commercial break. But when we come back, our focus will shift to education matters, because we know that NAT has said that from the 1st of September, teachers will be on strike. But on the other hand, Kupet says, no, this cannot happen. Let's go back to the negotiating table with the Teacher Service Commission. So it is a discussion you don't want to miss after the short break.